Hey guys, welcome back. Uh, okay, so in our last video, we had just set up the basics of you know the Angular route. So let us just move ahead with the rest of the stuff. So if you can see over here, whenever I am I'm hitting my server, I'm getting something like about and services, but there is not anything which is getting pre-selected, right? There has to be some about section or the services section that should be really pre-selected. How can I really go and achieve that? I will go to my app route over here. I can do and achieve that in one more way, and that is nothing but by specifying an empty path. Okay, and I can see what component I want to load. Okay, I want to load nothing but the about component when my URL is going to be blank, like in this particular stage. So if I do that and if I refresh over here, if you can see, I'm getting about component at place, and you can see there is no URL appended with about. So if you go to about, it's there. For some say it's there, but somehow it is not the cleanest way to really achieve this particular thing. Rather than that, I can really go and use something called as redirect to the redirection of the routes. That means whenever you're coming to this particular blank route, I'm going to redirect to about component. So let me really do that so that it would be uh, I'll just go to redirect to, and my redirect to is going to be, let me just so my redirect to is going to be nothing but my about. So I'm going to go to nothing but my about route, this particular path, that's nothing but my redirect to. Let me see what happens. Okay, I'll just remove this particular thing off and let me see what happens. Okay, it gives me an error over here. If you can have a deeper look over here, you can see it is this particular error is just telling me that give me something called as path match. Well, just so actually what is path match over here? So whenever you're using redirection, the router is expecting a value of one more property, and that is nothing but the path match. Okay, so it has two values to it. One can be nothing but prefix, and the other one can be nothing but for. So what this particular thing really stand out for? So when I say into my redirect to property the path, I say the path matches prefix. So what it is going to do is it is going to check, like, to this particular redirection URL, is there something which is prefixed with this particular blank URL, right? So that means it is asking that it is interpreting it in such a way that whenever I'm going to hit any URL which is going to be prefixed with a blank URL, I'm going to understand, okay, I'm in this particular route and the rest of the things is going to be happen. That means it is going to redirect to about. So let me see really how does it work. So if I just go over here, it is working absolutely fine, but there is a bit of a problem over here. Over here, it is telling me that, okay, it has somehow gauged that whatever this in this particular state, the prefix of this particular URL, this is nothing but my server domain. Okay, post that it is nothing but an empty string, so that is nothing but this particular route, and it is expecting it as a prefix, and it has anyways have nothing to no path is really designed over here. So this particular blank is nothing but this particular white spaces over here. So that is how it is working. But when you go to about or services, you can see things are really it is not okay. Let me okay. Okay, so you can see actually it is working, but in the previous Angular 2, you know, but always it is a best practice to to put this particular path match property as full, so that you can see over here, right? Okay, so you can see over here it is working fine, and whenever you're coming to this particular point, so for this particular Angular version which I'm using, it is really working out well. But in the previous versions, if at all you were using prefix, it would always, for the rest of the routes also, whenever you're routing to any other component, like for example you're going to prefix, for every route over here, for every route the prefix is always nothing but a blank string. So it used to always navigate to about component only, but for this particular scenario it is really working fine for us. But for the sake of safety, whenever we are using redirect to, and your path match should always be full and not prefix. Okay, so that is about redirection, and now it is much more clearer to you guys how the things are really working out over here as uh, the redirection. So moving ahead, we are going to talk about something like parameterized routes. So that means whenever we are routing from one place to another, one URL to another URL, if at all you want to pass any parameters or you pass any data via query string, that is nothing but the URL, this particular part of the browser, we can also achieve that. Okay, so what are we really going to do over here is we are going to create some list over here in my about component, and then after on the click of that particular list, I'm going to go to some other route wherein I'll be fetching out the details for that particular list which was created, and I'm going to pass that particular ID of that particular list to the details component via query string. So really to achieve this particular you know thing, uh, what I'm firstly I need to create a list out over here. So firstly what I'll do is I'll just go to my nothing but my about component, and I am just going to you know create an HTML. I really don't want this particular template to be there in this place. So what I'll do is I'll just create a file over here, I'll save it, and I'll give it a name as about.html. I'll just paste this thing off. You can see now there's about HTML, and I'll just paste my stuff over here and just remove the stuff. That would be much more simpler, and we'll create the things out for you. And it is nothing but an a tag. I'll just just say test. Cool. And okay, so now this is nothing but my list component, and how I'm going to associate this with my template is nothing but I'll give it to something like template URL property, and my template would be nothing but my URL path would be not relative but my absolute path from the source, and this is much more great. So once I refresh application, if you can see, I'm getting something called a test over here. Okay, that is nothing but the list which I was really talking about. Okay, so these are the class. Please don't bother about these things. That's just that to make the example look beautiful, a bit presentable. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a model inside my about component. So inside my topics, right, inside my about, there can be a lot of topics to be talked about, like technology or consulting or human resources, mobility, etc. Oh, what I'm going to really do is inside my class I'm going to create a public property, and that is nothing but my topics, and my topics is going to be looked something like this. Okay, so this says that there's something called technology, and ID is 1, consulting ID is 2, human resources ID is 3, mobility ID is 4, right? And let me just go over here and I'll just, I'll just, so I'm going to use, right, something called as ng4. ng4 is nothing but a directive which is used to iterate over a collection and to templatized, and you can write your your application in your the template which is going to be rendered in a loop, which can be, you can directly do that into your HTML file by using ng4. So ng4 is nothing but a structural directive. So structural directive in AngularJS is Angular2 is nothing but ng4, ng switch, ng yeah, something like that. So ng4, ng switch, these are structural directive, and these are preceded by nothing but a star sign, which this is nothing but for now. It is just for the fact that you understand what I'm trying to do over here. We can look out these directives in the other videos, which are nothing based on the directives. And please don't stress out on how things are really written over here. If you know it, it's well and good. If you're not, please don't stress out. So over here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to iterate over, topics. This is nothing but the public property which I've created, and this is nothing but the iterator value, that is nothing but the t variable is going to be like that. And I'm just going to give some class to it, and my class would be nothing but list group item, if you can see. Okay, and inside which I'm going to do just say nothing but t.id. I'm going to print t.id, and inside my interpolation I'm going to say t.name. So my t is nothing going to be whenever I'm iterating over t topics, my t is nothing going to be an object which is nothing but this particular object. Is going to be having name and name and id. So if I go over here, it looks really fine. I'm iterating over it, I'm giving a class, and I'm just rendering it. If I just refresh it, okay, you can see I am having a list out of here. And yeah, so one more thing, so like over here it is looking much more cleaner to me, but what I really want to achieve is on the click of these particular on these particular links, I want to go to I want to go to another route, and that has to be a parameterized route, and I'm going to pass these IDs to it, and I'm going to render my detail over there. So before going over there, I need to create something, right, some component which is going to handle that, and that is nothing going to be I'm going to create a new folder over here, and I'm going to create it like about details, about details. Okay, I have somehow rename. I need to rename DET. Okay, so now details. Okay, so now over here I'll just create a file, and that is going to be my component. So I'll just go about .ts about details.component.ts. Okay, so I'm just going to write the definition of this particular thing, and it's going to be import, and my import is going to be nothing but a simple component, and my component is going to be there in define and Angular core, which we're going to do a lot of time, and I want to do something like component decorator, and this particular decorator is going to have a template. I'm not going to write a template URL, a separate file, and this will make my life much more easy to write it in line. Okay, so how I'm going to do is over here, I'm going to create an h3 tag. Okay, and this particular h3 tag is nothing but about details, and that's really cool. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say my selected option ID is going to be nothing but something. Okay, and what my something would be, I'll be writing over here. I'll just first export my class, and my class is nothing but, you know, about details. Component. So we are following the same, about component, and we are following the same nomenclature. So nothing more, it is going to be about details, nothing but the component. So how are we really going to achieve, this particular thing? So if I just go to my app dot route, right, let me just go and create that particular, I'll just go to something called path, and my path would be nothing but about. I'm going to give a parameter to it, and that is nothing going to be, the parameters is nothing but this particular, it is nothing but, the parameter is defined as, symbolized by the colon over here, and that is nothing going to be the ID over here. And this particular browser, like whenever there would be something like about slash something over here, so whatever is part at this passed at this particular point, this is nothing going to be the parameter which can be read into the component which we are going to declare against this particular route. And my component is going to be nothing but about details component. So how I'm going to, so before writing that out, I'm just going to put this, and from where I'm going to do that, it is going to be from the components. There's going to be about details, and there's going to be about details component. Superb. I'll just import it with the class name, and there's going to be about detail component. I'll just copy this particular thing, I'll just assign to it. Always when you're using this particular kind of, you're adding a new component, please don't forget to add it to the views, so my base module also understand, okay, this is a new component which has taken, which has been introduced to the feature module, which is talking more about routes. And this is a common place where routes are really defined into your application. It is good for, this is a good separation of concern to have. Okay, so so we have defined like how my nested route, or not nested route, the parameterized, route is really, um, going to work. Cool. So how am I going to do that? So for example, whenever there would be something like about slash anything, that is going to be my parameterized ID. Let me just refresh my application. I go to, okay, so exports is not defined, and it is at what part? Okay, it is there into my about details component. It is, I guess I have written, there's a typo there. I can go to my about details component, cool, and okay, I guess now this should work. Cool. So if you come here, there's nothing but about, but now whenever I go and say any of the ID, it can be 1, 2, 3, 4. Let me say, for example, I'm hitting on consulting. I'm going to write the code in such a way that my URL is going to be something like this. When I hit it, you can see it comes to my about details. It is recognizing that I have written something like this, like whenever something is preceded by slash anything, it is considering this as ID. But over here, my about details, about details component is getting rendered. I'm seeing my template, but I'm not really seeing what ID has been passed over here. But at the same time, I'm seeing it in my query string, and that is nothing but over here. So there is some way wherein you can, really achieve that. And how you can achieve that is by doing something like, let's see what we can do is now. If while we'll just import something, from, you know at the rate Angular router. Cool. Inside this, I'm going to have something like activated route. So activated route is nothing but, it is something which help us to fetch this particular data from the URL. So how I'm going to, inject that into my application, I'm going to use it inside my class, and that is nothing but by just, inside my constructor, I'm going to write my constructor over here. I'm going to define a private property, and my private property, okay, it is going to be nothing but something called route, and that route is nothing but going to be my activated route. So you can see, okay, there would be a private property which would be referencing my activated route over here. And then, you know moving ahead, I want to really, there is something like now what now here that this is one thing, like, but when I really want to, this is the place, the activated route, that means my private variable route. It would help me to, to get me this particular ID which is there, which is a parameter to this particular route. But there has to be some way, there has to be some time inside my lifecycle hook of this particular component, that I would really fetch this particular data and will be showing this particular data inside my template. So that would be nothing but whenever my class is going to be loaded, and that is nothing but ng on init. Okay, so just to be, to implement, there is nothing but an interface which is written, then there is nothing but on init, and I need to implement that on init to, you know implements on init. Okay, and over here you can see it is giving me an error over here, because ng on init is, if at all I want to implement this. So this is having, this is this on init is nothing but a class which is abstract class which has some method called ng on init, right? And this ng on init is nothing going to be implemented over here. So how I'm going to do that? So over here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, you know I'm going to create a public, you know public variable called ID, and that is going to be of type string over here, and that is cool. And I'm going to just say let ID, this is going to be my private, like my local variable for this ng init, and I'm going to fetch the router parameter, the parameter from this dot route. Okay, this dot route, and I'll say nothing but params, and I'll just say, nothing but, no, I'm going to say this dot route dot snapshot dot params, and it is going to be nothing but ID. This is nothing but the ID which we have really, this is nothing but the ID which I'm trying to access over here. And then over here I'll just assign this to my public variable ID, and nothing but ID, if you can say. And if this is public, I can really interpolate it over here by using ID. I guess this would be more than enough. I'll just refresh this particular stuff. You can see now whatever I'm able to read this particular URL. If I just pass it as 5, it would be showing me the detail as 5. So this is how the things would be working for the app details. Now let us see how I can achieve the same thing by programmatically, by just tapping on my list, and I can just, while after tapping, I'll go to my details component. So I'll just go to my about component, and you can see, so over here I need to write a click event for my list. So I'll just go down over here, and you know I'll just go over here. I'll just create a click event. So this is nothing but you know the event. Whenever you are trying to give a click event to any of the DOM elements, this is the way how to do it inside the round bracket, and that is a click uh, text which is written inside it. This is, and I'll be implementing something like, okay, a select option inside my class, and I'll be passing the current instance of topics to it. So let me just copy this particular thing and go to my component, and I'll just go over here and I'll just implement my selected option over here. And I'll just over here, every time it will be having this particular you know thing, this thing. So how I can do is, right, so to navigate to append this particular URL programmatically, what I'm going to do is I need something from Angular router, and I'll just say import, and that is going to be from my Angular router, and I'm going to be having something called router. Okay, so now this particular router is going to have you know uh, a navigate method which would be helping us to navigate to about details. But first I need to dependency inject it di, and how I'm going to do it the same way. I'll just create a private variable, and that is nothing going to be, I'll name it as router, and this is nothing going to be as my router definition which has been imported over here. I'll just save this thing up, and over here I'll just say this dot router dot navigate, and over here what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an array, and the array is going to be having two properties. That is nothing but what URL I really need to append, and that is nothing but my about URL, and there has to be some parameter to it, and my parameter is nothing but going to be my t.id. Okay, so this is nothing but this particular object is going to have t over here. So I'll just put it over here, and this would help us to navigate on click. So when I click on any of the list, this particular function is going to be executed with the current instance of the list object, the topics, and then I'm going to navigate to it to the about URL, and I'm going to be having a parameter called ID, which is there inside each and every object, and it is sent to this particular callback. So I'll just go and refresh this particular application, and I'll just tap on it. So once I tap, you can see it is working fine, right? I can go down, you can see when I tap on second ID, when I tap on 3, the ID is 3, and it is getting appended over here, and it is also reading it from the URL. So this is how the parameterized route really works, and the path match property and redirect to. Let's continue for the rest of the things of the Angular router in the next video. Thanks a lot, guys. Thanks a lot, guys.